Transresistor Radio.
You are listening to Transresistor Radio. I'm your host, Aaron Franz. My website is ageoftransitions.com. Please go to ageoftransitions.com to subscribe to this podcast. I have an RSS feed. You can subscribe through iTunes, you can use Stitcher Radio, and you can also just download every episode directly off of the website. So I hope that you will do that. And if you subscribe through iTunes, I would ask a favor if you could give a star rating or write up a review, especially. That will help out in promoting the podcast because more people will see it, more people will listen, and that's going to help out a lot. So thank you very much for doing that, and thank you for listening to Transresistor Radio, of course. Today on Transresistor Radio, I continue the alt media series of podcasts, and indeed, I'm actually concluding this series. So this will be the final interview in the series. Now, I will be inviting other people onto Transresistor Radio in the future to be interviewed, and no doubt I will get other people who create alternative media. So I'm not done speaking with people in the alt media or even asking them questions about alt media, but this series, as it is officially, where I'm just focusing purely on this issue, is coming to a close. I hope that you have all enjoyed it. Please send me an email and let me know what you think, or leave a comment on the website in the post for this podcast or any of the podcasts. And I hope that you'll go back and listen to the past interviews that I've done if you have not yet. I've had lots of great people on, wide spectrum of people doing independent alternative media, all folks who I respect, and so it's great to get their ideas on the subject, because it's an important subject, one that's near and dear to you and I, me, the independent media producer, and you, the audience. We're all in this thing, or we're all a part of it. We're all part of the alternative media one way or another. Before we get to the interview today, I'd like to let you know how you, the audience, can help me out in what I'm doing with ageoftransitions.com, help support me. The best way that you can help is to buy a copy of my book, Revolve Man's Scientific Rise to Godhood. I have a paperback version. When you buy the paperback, you get a DVD copy of the Age of Transitions film, which I've made. That comes free with the book, so check that out. And there's also an ebook copy available if you'd prefer that. I have other items on the products/services tab of my website that you can check out. I have a donate button, and I also happen to have eBay links. If you are an eBay shopper, click on the links on my site before you buy anything on eBay. It will not cost anything extra for you to do, but it will just help me out when you make a purchase. It just sends a little portion of the sale my way. So just a little thing, that incidental sort of thing, that if you happen to be an eBay shopper, it helps. But of course, I hope you will check out my book, Revolve Man's Scientific Rise to Godhood, most of all. The interview on today's show is with Tom Secker of InvestigatingTheTerror.com and SpyCulture.com. If you have not been listening to his podcast, Clandestine, I suggest that you do so. He's been podcasting, putting the podcast out through his website, SpyCulture.com. So again, check that out. Listen to it, see what you think. And I have Tom here today to speak about alt media. Okay, today on Transresistor Radio, I am speaking with Tom Secker. Hello there. How are you doing, Tom?
I'm doing great, Aaron, and thank you for having me back on.
It's always wonderful to speak with you, and I'm very excited to have you on in this alternative media series of podcasts that I have been doing. And in fact, I will say that this is the last interview I'm going to be doing in this series, at least officially. So there's a situation set up here. We've got the bases loaded, okay? Guy on every base. We have Tom Secker up at bat. Aaron Franz is the pitcher for some reason. So I'm going to be pitching you these balls really fast here, Tom, and it's up to you to hit them out of the park. Do you think you're ready for that?
Where is this bizarre metaphor going?
I don't know. I don't really know where it came from either.
Yes. Okay. Fine. Yes, I'm up for that.
Okay, good. That's what I was hoping. So, Tom, in terms of alternative media, your latest venture has been Clandestine, your podcast. I just want to ask you, how's that going for you?
Yeah, it's going well. I'm actually having a lot of fun doing it. It is a bit of a struggle to try and always find the time every week, since I've sort of committed to doing it as a weekly show. Trying to find that time can sometimes be a struggle, and as a result, the quality of the podcast does sometimes dip that usually is just a question of me having to kind of rush something out that I haven't really thought through properly. But on the whole, I'm really enjoying doing it. I'm really enjoying both having guests on and doing shows myself, just reflecting on topics and trying to introduce people to some stuff they probably haven't heard before. And yeah, it's nice having your own platform. It's nice not having to hope that you can get invited on a show and ask the right question, and just having a platform where you can say whatever the hell you like.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, well, in terms of the podcast not being up to your standards, doesn't come across on my end, because I think they're all great. I really am enjoying these podcasts, and the whole format where you take on a specific subject and you get in depth. To me, that's what's so good about the podcast medium, is that it allows you to really flesh things out. I mean, what are your opinions on podcast medium and its real strengths? What do you think?
Well, the great thing about it is that it costs so little to do. It really is something you can do. Like right now, I'm talking to you via a relatively cheap microphone plugged into a relatively cheap laptop via Skype. That's it. Uh-huh. You know, you don't necessarily need any more than that to get going and get a show going. Well, I suppose you need a website to publish it on, but again, not a difficult thing or an expensive thing to get. So it's certainly a great way for anyone who fancies dipping their toe into the water of producing a bit of media, but doesn't want to have to commit to making a documentary film, say, to just have a go at it. And all you need to do is either get yourself and a friend or a guest or whoever and have a conversation about something or talk about something. And so as an introductory medium, I think it's absolutely fantastic. And I will say that it's probably second only to reading in my life in terms of getting information. I mean, I read an astonishing amount by most people's standards. I spend lots of time reading. So I get most of my information that way. But podcasting's probably number two. I certainly spend more time listening to podcasts than I do watching YouTube, which I think is healthy.
Yeah. But when you said reading astonishing amount by most standards, I just imagined reading a Harry Potter book there for a moment.
I've never read a Harry Potter book in my life.
Neither have I. Let's keep it that way.
Though I did read a little bit of 50 Shades of Grey, and I was utterly appalled.
No. It was no good. It didn't turn out as you thought it would, or
well, my problem with that in particular is, firstly, that it's incredibly badly written, and I mean like worse than Dan Brown badly written. And the second thing is that the whole story is about this incredibly naive, virginal young girl who is serially abused by this wealthy, as far as I can tell, sociopath, or at least sadist. And somehow this is supposed to be a sex story for women in their 40s and 50s. I mean, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah, you know what? That's similar to that weird New Moon or whatever that vampire crap is that they're throwing out there for the tweens. It's odd. And this is mainstream media that we're talking about here. And it tends to be like the big, huge, successful stuff has a lot of weird sadistic things in it. And put it in the context of mainstream media, is that what mainstream media is, as a good metaphor, that it is sadistic, and that the alternative, what we're doing, is an answer to that? Is that at all true?
Well, I certainly think that pretty much anything that gets put into the mainstream media ends up as some form of psychological abuse on the audience. If they talk about sex, they will talk about it in an abusive and destructive way. They will never talk about things in a constructive and peaceful way, in a loving way, because that just doesn't exist in the mainstream media. And in as much as I do believe in the alternative media, and I have all kinds of problems and skepticism about it, as we've talked about before, and as I'm sure we'll talk about again, I do think that's the one thing that I do like about it, kind of unreservedly, is that I don't really see too many people in the alternative media who are openly and nakedly trying to abuse their audience in the same way that there is at least a lot more peaceful, constructive, friendly or loving dialogue and discussion and exploration in the alternative media. At least that does exist in the alternative media, even if there is some crap and some horror shows as well. Whereas the mainstream media is just this more or less endless stream of soul-rotting bile that, there's just sort of nothing to redeem about that, whereas there's plenty to redeem about the alternative media.
Yeah, so the alternative media really, in a sense, has come about as a consequence of this, is that the mainstream is so bad that there at least has to be something else. Is that the case here?
Well, yeah, in both a simple way and a quite complex way. I think, because why is it that people are looking? Why is it that people are going on the internet, mostly, and looking for something different to what they're normally getting? Because it takes more effort to go on the internet and actively look for something than it does to channel surf on the television. So why is it people are doing that? It's because channel surfing on the television isn't giving them what they want, and more fundamentally, isn't giving them what they need. And quite a lot of people are recognizing this. And so quite a lot of people, if they're not taking the radical and utterly sensible step of just turning off the television and not turning it on and watching it, are at least thinking, I'm going to spend some of my time looking for something else. Now, sure, a lot of that will end up in some very funny places, and they'll join some cult that is all about standing around ringing bells or something. People do all this, but at least some of those people are going to look for, shows that are about discussing humanity as it really is, that shows that are about discussing the world and politics as they really are, and embracing the possibility that we can do something better than this, that we can be better than this. And we don't have to pursue some great technological or economic or whatever solution, and that actually the solution probably just lies in our own attitudes and behaviors. And that's what I think the alternative media is now starting to address. I mean, for a long time, it was just obsessing about, Gulf of Tonkin and 9/11 and Monsanto and things. And I'm not saying these things shouldn't be talked about, of course, but there is a more fundamental thing that I think the alternative media can address and can provide to people. And when it does provide that, that's when people who have, got sick of the television and Facebook to some extent are actually getting something out of it, and something that will make a difference in their lives. And that's exactly what the alternative media should be doing, and should be doing more, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll talk about all that great promise in a moment. But, what they say, Tom, before you get to heaven, you got to go to hell, right? You heard that before?
Did they say that? Who says that?
I don't know who said it, but somebody did.
Sounds like a line from the country. Or probably it.
Regardless of where it came from, that's where we're going. We're going straight to hell, because there are some unsettling trends within alternative media. It's all not just roses here. What do you think, Tom, are any unsettling trends that might be in this landscape we find ourselves in?
Well, there's two that really spring to mind that kind of piss me off on a regular basis. The first is the tendency for the so-called alternative media to simply leech things from the mainstream media and either put a conspiratorial spin on them, or just select those news stories that already have a kind of conspiratorial element to them. For example, whenever the Daily Mail publishes yet another article about Princess Diana and MI6 assassinating her, and it's always some fluffy guff that doesn't lead anywhere. And every single time, Prison Planet picks up that story and reproduces it on its own website, and it goes on and blah, 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 blah. And this just goes on endlessly. And I think this isn't journalism. It wasn't journalism when the Daily Mail were doing it. It certainly bloody isn't journalism when Prison Planet pick it up and just reproduce it, is it? They're not doing anything there. They're just copying an article from someone else's website. I mean, there's got to be more to it than that. And so that bugs me, that way of leeching off the mainstream, whatever we can grab from the mainstream that fits our agenda, and just, feed people on that. I think that it hands all the power back to the mainstream. They can help they can shape the dialogue in the alternative media because we're doing that.
Yeah.
And that's something we just got to stop doing it, to be honest.
Yeah. Giving more power to them. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's disempowering to do it. So that bugs me. The other really disempowering thing that the alternative media has a tendency to do is to categorize everything as an all-encompassing systemic conspiracy, or one of the two, either a all-encompassing system that we can't do anything about, or an all-encompassing conspiracy that we can't really do anything about. And that just feeds into people's sense of victimization and resentment and powerlessness, none of which helps them, none of which is what I was sort of describing before about, saying the solution lies within us, that we can actually do something about this. We can do something about all of the problems that we have, because we're the ones who bloody created them in the first place. It's all just human behavior, after all. So, if you see it in those terms, it's much more empowering. Whereas if you see it in terms of, abstract names like the New World Order, I understand it's a kind of useful shorthand, but the way that's sort of battered on people's heads, New World Order, it doesn't make them feel good about themselves, does it? It just makes them feel like, oh, there's nothing I can do and the world's a shithole. And it isn't. And there is something we can do. And so, again, that's something that I just wish the alternative media would simply stop doing. Just find another way to talk about it, because there's plenty of better ways to talk about these things. Same subjects, just kind of talk about them in a different way would be my recipe.
Yeah, well, this is the same thing that's come up in previous interviews, is that so much of what the alternative media does is not journalism, it's just news commentary. So it's commentary, and yet it's saying it, at its worst, they're saying that it's journalism. Might there be opportunities in the alternative media here for us to actually, get on the ground and kind of find unique stories and do actual investigative journalism?
Well, I'd hope so, because, I have seen things out there, like one of the various blogs that I've used from time to time is some completely independent court reporter who I think is actually in your neck of the woods, or relatively near to your neck of the woods. And that's what they do. They turn up in court and they provide independent media coverage of court cases that are going on. And it's a lot less sensationalized and a lot less sort of crazy than the crime and court coverage that you get in the mainstream press. And this person just, they get donations on their blog or whatever. I don't know how much money they're making. I don't know whether they're doing this for a living. I don't know what the backstory is. But things like that show you that if someone's motivated and interested and they're writing about something that other people are interested in, and let's face it, most subjects out there, you'll find someone to be interested in it. It can be done. So yeah, it already is being done. It just, when I look at organizations, again, like Prison Planet, and you hear Alex Jones boasting about how much money they make and how many viewers they've got and how many subscribers they've got and all of this. And I think, but how often do you actually use that money to hire a local reporter after a major event and, find a local reporter in that city who is reliable and independent and can do a good job and send them out to go and talk to people, find out some stuff, take some pictures, whatever, just do journalism. How often do they actually do that? Not very often. Well, why not? They've got the money to do it. I haven't got the money to do it. Corbett hasn't got the money to do it. None of the other people you've been interviewing on this series have got the money to do that. But Prison Planet have. So I'd say another thing that people should be doing is calling on those organizations that do have the big audiences and the big budgets to, yeah, like you say, actually do some just proper, ordinary journalism. Just, if nothing else, to prove that it can be done, to show what it looks like to actually do journalism properly. Because to be honest, most of the time Prison Planet isn't doing it any better than Fox News is doing it. So, but they have an opportunity to, whereas frankly I've completely given up on Fox News. There's no hope for them. No,
of course not.
You know what I'm saying here?
Yeah, no, I do. Yeah, this is the problem of sensationalism, and it creeps in everywhere. How does one who is truly independent, making independent media, not kind of fall into the hole of becoming sensationalist? Because I will say that if you sensationalize your headlines or whatever it is you're doing, you just add a little flair to it, then it's going to get more attention, but it's also going to take away credibility, and you're going to fall into the trap of that. How do we avoid that trap?
I avoid that trap by being resolutely opposed to ever being popular. I have absolutely no dreams of mass fame.
It's very noble of you, Tom. Very noble.
Well, and realistic.
It is, yeah. No, it's great. It's useful for sure.
And I am what I am. I'm the sort of person who is never going to have, mass appeal in the same way that some people do. And that's fine. I have other talents. So I would say, follow your natural talent rather than try and gain an audience. Because if you do what comes naturally to you, then you'll do it well. If your natural talent is comedy, then you'll make a much better comedy podcast than you will something like what I do. So, okay, fine, great. And if you're offering comedy that isn't this endless drudgery of cynicism about the human race, which seems to pass for comedy these days, then you're contributing something good to the world. You're making alternative media. You're making alternative entertainment. Great, But at the same time, I'm not a stand-up comic, and so my best skills, I think, are in researching unusual stuff that's significant and that most people don't know about, and trying to find a way to get that across to people. So that's what I do in my show. And if you're interested in that, check my show out. But if you're not, fine. It's not like I expect everyone in the world or want everyone in the world to listen to what I've got to say. I wouldn't even have time to respond to their reactions to it. What would be the point? I'd rather get through to a bunch of people who are kind of like me and you. We're not looking for something that you can find in big glossy letters or big flashing lights, because you never find the right kind of stuff that way. We're looking for something with a bit of subtlety and imagination and intellect behind it, something with some substance. So, yeah, my answer is don't worry about popularity. Worry about who you are, what you can do, what comes naturally to you, and find a way to do that. And in doing that, you're bound to attract similar people, because that's just the way it goes. Like people are attracted to like people.
Trill recognize trill. That's what they say.
Mm.
Well, I certainly agree with you, and I am in the same boat, Tom. I mean, I totally understand that. You just do something, and it doesn't have to be the most popular thing in the world. However, I do also understand where a lot of people are coming from. You've got this celebrity culture, and celebrities are cool, and we want to be like them. And what do? They do what everybody likes. So the cool thing is to do something that everybody's going to love you for. But we've got the quandary here in the alternative media that we do things that not only will not everybody like, but some people will just downright hate. What do we do about that? Like the people that really dislike what we do, and the whole combating sort of celebrity, what do we do in the face of all that?
Well, the first thing that I always recommend to everyone with regard to this is just stop taking celebrity seriously. I mean, I'm not saying don't ever listen to pop music or don't ever watch a mainstream film or whatever. If you think someone's funny and you like the TV show they're on, I suppose, okay, go ahead, watch it. But don't think that the person in it is any more than that. Don't think that the person in it actually cares about the political issues that they might talk about, because their whole job consists of portraying an image to be liked. That's actually what their job is. Yeah. So just don't expect someone, Russell Brand. What's that woman that married Brad Pitt who keeps doing various things and adopting African babies?
Oh, Angelina Jolie.
Yeah. yeah. People like that. Just don't take them seriously when it comes to real stuff, because they aren't people of substance, or at least even if they aren't people of substance that are actually in your life. They're just a picture on a screen. So,
it's funny. The perception, you're exactly right. The perception of them is pure persona. So it's put out as a persona. Their job is to pay tribute and hold up that persona. Now, they may be a completely different person in their actual life, and we don't actually know who they are. We just know the persona. So I guess in alternative media, is the persona, is that a big thing? Do we as alternative media producers go about creating personas? Is that a trap that we can fall into? And again, how do we avoid that trap?
I think it is a trap that you can avoid, you can fall into, and one that you can avoid relatively easily. I avoid it by using my real name. For one thing, I am who I am.
Yeah.
You know, not that I'm in any way encouraging people to do this, but if you really wanted to find out if I'm a real person, you can find out that I'm a real person and that is my actual name. It's not quite exactly the same as the name on my birth certificate, but I don't want people knowing my middle name, do I? No one ever does. A little bit of trauma that almost every parent inflicts on their child.
Can't help it. I know, I'm a father. I do the same thing. It's just fun to do.
But yeah, so you use your real name. You be honest about who you are and where you're coming from, and you don't try and adopt a persona, because sooner or later people will see through it, or at least people of substance will see through it, and so all you'll ever attract that way is a lot of shallow people and lunatics. And I suppose if that's all you want to do, well, okay, but I don't see that as any kind of mission for the alternative media. I don't care about numbers. I don't buy into this notion that, we need to wake everybody up, or we need to get everyone engaged in politics, and the more people that are interested in this, somehow the better the result will be. Because I've seen it lots of times with lots of movements, and they go nowhere. And the end result isn't anything better than if they'd actually, just a smaller number of people had said, we're going to try and achieve this specifically, and just went out and did it. Whereas if they think, we need to somehow defer all of this onto other people and have, as many people as possible, that will somehow what? What kind of conclusion is it going to bring about? So, sorry, what was the question again?
Well, you're getting onto a great point here, Tom, because we're not only talking about quality of host or producer or whatever, we're talking about quality of audience too. And quality and quantity are not, they don't go together at the same rate, as it were. So what do you think?
Not in media.
Yeah.
It seems that they don't. I can't think of any show that's that good that has that big an audience.
Yeah, absolutely. With your audience in particular, what has been your interactions with them? How do you feel about your audience, I guess, just in general?
Well, I've got to say something nice, haven't I?
Yes. Something.
Aside from some of the proper batshit comments I get on YouTube, but that's just YouTube for you, isn't it?
Yeah,
on the whole, my interactions with my audience are very good. I get some very well thought out, very interesting emails off people, and you can strike up real dialogues with some of these people, and that's actually one of the most fun things about doing a podcast and having websites, is that you get emails from people who you otherwise would never have heard of in your life, and they will send you links to websites you've never heard of, or tell you about books or films you've never heard of, or whatever. And it all enriches your experience of life. It does enrich my experience of life. I've had people, suggest things to me that I'm sure I'm going to do podcast episodes on in the future, that kind of thing. So yeah, I've actually had a very constructive and a nice experience with my audience. And I think that's partly because I've set out to present stuff in a way that is going to put off those who are just looking for some kind of quick, flashy fix. No one who's really into that is ever going to get into my stuff in a big way. So chances are I'm just never going to hear from them. So it is also, that's kind of what the alternative media is for people like me and you, who aren't doing it on some full-time basis and with the aim of building it up into something we're going to make a career out of. We're doing it more as sort of part-timers and hobbyists and people who are just sort of seeing what happens. What we're doing, in effect, is sticking up a little flag and saying, here I am. This is what I'm interested in, and seeing if that attracts other people who are also interested in that stuff and who actually want to talk about it in a decent way. And because we do our shows, our shows are quite similar in some ways, because we present them in a way that's completely sane and that isn't in any way sensationalized, we're going to attract people of like mind, and so we have a more constructive response than you would get, I believe, if you do the more flashy bullshit stuff. And so we have a better experience of it, and they have a better experience of it. And from that, you can actually generate a bit of, I don't know, I hesitate to use terms like positive energy, but you know what I mean, positive momentum.
Yeah.
A ripple effect, whatever.
Yeah, you can move forward and you can also build off of each other because, like you said, you have people communicating with you and bringing new information to the table, sending you links to all sorts of things. And then you, as a curator of information, because that's basically all we really are, we're here curating stuff and putting it out there for people and basically saying, hey, did you ever see this? Or did you ever think about this? And it becomes almost a group project. Is this like again, this gets in the sense of community of alternative media. What are your thoughts on alternative media as a community? How should it work? Should we stray away from the idea of community, or is it an excellent thing that we should embrace?
I think it's something we should embrace if we can do it in the right ways, because an awful lot of the online alternative media community that exists at the moment mostly exists via Facebook pages, and just it basically consists of sharing things on Facebook and Twitter and wherever. And that isn't going to accomplish a damn thing. It just isn't,
Sure.
to be honest. All of those people could take all of that time that they spend doing that and just do something else with it. That would be my recommendation. Whatever else it is doing, it will be more constructive and useful in your life than that is. And that's the wrong way to go about it, because not only does it, catch us all up in this great big fishing net that is Facebook, but also because it's not a positively reinforcing community. I mean, that's the whole point of a community, is it not? Is that you can actually be stronger by cooperating with other people. You can be a better person. You can accomplish more of what you want to do by cooperating with other people of similar skills, but also contrasting and complementary skills and values and all the rest of it. That's the whole point of doing that. So if we can approach the sense of an alternative media community in that way, I think it could become very, very powerful. But these days, there's too much competing for YouTube hits. There's too many people worrying about how many subscribers they've got, how many likes they've got on their Facebook page, and measuring everything in those terms, rather than measuring it in terms of, am I having a positive impact on someone else's life, and are they having a positive impact on mine? If we start measuring it in that sense, then yeah, I think a community like that would be a great thing. There's just not that much of it around yet. And I find that a little bit frustrating and disappointing at times, but that's partly why I'm so kind of, if you like, level-headed and optimistic in my own work, is because I can't really sit around and bitch about other people not doing something unless I'm willing to do it myself. So I do it myself and see where that gets me.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing what you can do just by, kind of following a whim and kind of be like, hey, look, what if I did this? I feel like a lot of alternative media producers are around actually because of that. So people get this kind of high and mighty idea that you have to like build this perfect creation for people in order to look at. You can kind of like ease your way into it, right?
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, that's another problem that the alternative media has, is that it quite often conceives of itself as competing with the mainstream, which it isn't doing in terms of money or numbers or anything really yet. Maybe it will do one day, but even that, I don't think that's a particularly great mission for it. I think if it wants to be a genuinely alternative media, it has to offer people something alternative to the mainstream media. So, yeah, that is something that kind of bugs me, and I feel that, yeah, when the alternative media is done on that kind of whimsical way, like you say, where people just go, I wonder what happens if I, push this button. I was like this as a kid. I was always setting off, lift alarms, things like that.
Yeah, I hear you.
There's a big red button there, Beep. Oh dear. Anyway, but to be serious for a moment, I think I have done most of what I've done on a whim, and all of it is imperfect. And I think the mainstream media audience expects flashy bullshit and high production values. The alternative media audience is very forgiving. And I am, in particular, I'm quite a sort of critical person, but I will happily listen to something that hasn't been recorded perfectly, hasn't been put together perfectly, but is nonetheless interesting. It's on a valuable subject, and it's being done in a way that I actually find constructive and meaningful. And if it does all of those things, no one really cares whether it's 64 kilobytes per second, 60, whatever. No one really cares about aspect ratios and all of this kind of stuff. People will quite happily watch something that's actually quite badly made, but as long as it's got the right kind of content and delivered in the right way to them, they're perfectly happy to watch it. That doesn't mean you shouldn't strive to make your show good. It means you should abandon this notion of, I've got to make something perfect before I show it to anyone. No, forget all that. Make something that's imperfect and show it to people, and then they'll tell you how it's imperfect, and you might get better at it.
Yeah.
That's my attitude.
Yeah, that's me for sure. I couldn't. I don't know. I feel that people are so timid in doing everything, and just that it just takes one little step to begin something. And so much of what you're saying too is this sort of machine versus man. How appropriate here on Trans Resistor Radio to be talking about that. But you're saying that people are all obsessed with the analytics, and you gotta get the hits, and like it's gotta like look technically perfect. But on the other side of that is like, no, like I just want to build something with soul, you know what I mean? And something with spirit. And is that what's going on here? Is this the man versus the machine once again, Tom?
You're determined to crowbar that into the conversation, aren't you?
Had to do it. Yeah, this is Trans Resistor Radio.
Yeah, of course. No, it's perfectly fair. Yes, there is an element of that going on, that people measuring their success, if you like, by the same metrics that we measure success in the mainstream, whereby it's all about audience numbers and audience retention and how many hits you got and how viral your thing went, rather than actually saying the whole point of what's wrong with the mainstream media is their fundamental set of values and the way that they measure things. That's actually what is so destructive about it, is that they're trying to enforce on us this mechanized, efficiency-based, both economy but also general culture and society, where it's all calculated and it's all measured in that kind of a way, rather than saying what is most fundamental to us and what is. And that differs, obviously, from person to person and group to group. I'm not saying there's, kind of one-size-fits-all answer to that question at all, but that's the question we have to ask. What's of substance to us, actually, in our lives? And if we can build media around that, around sharing that with other people and making it entertaining and making it intellectually satisfying and all of the other things that mainstream media can do but just usually does with the worst subjects and does it in the worst way, then you have an alternative media worthy of the name. And yeah, you have some soul, some substance, some spirit. That's kind of where it's got to come from. I'm not really interested in kind of the truth movement anymore, because it doesn't seem to have any interest in truth, to be honest. It seems to have quite a lot of interest in fantasy. So, okay. But what could grow out of that? What could grow out of that is if you like, a substance movement. A movement about, let's create a culture of things that are meaningful rather than things that are bullshit. So instead of it being about truth versus deception, it's about substance versus bullshit. That's a much healthier, I think, dynamic for the truth movement, the alternative media, the whole phenomenon to adopt.
Yeah. I did mean to ask you about the truth movement, and that's it there. And I'm glad that you touched on that. And you also got talking about the future a little bit, and the future is always murky, and we never know exactly what it's going to be. But what do you think may be, or could possibly be, or any other thoughts you have, of the future's take on the alternative media that we're producing now? Will this just be a lost piece of history that maybe it had influence but nobody will remember? Will people remember this and venerate it? Do you have any thoughts on that at all?
Well, an awful lot on that will depend on whether or not the internet still exists in 10, 20, 50 years' time. And I think it probably will, because despite all of their attempts and all of the mechanisms built into the internet to potentially, push the button and take the thing down, they've kind of got too much invested in it now to, I think, really be able to do that without it having some, incredibly disastrous consequences, in which case all of this discussion is irrelevant, to be honest. If we get to that point, none of this matters. But, yeah, okay, they're going to try and control it. And one of the things that the alternative media can do is to fight that, so that it does have that legacy, so that someone can look back in 50 years and watch our films for free. Just watch them because they were interested, they were curious, and they found something and they watched it. Because that's kind of the best sort of consumer of media that you get. It's just someone who found something because they were bothered to look. So my thoughts on my hopes for the future, which are probably more important, are that the alternative media matures into something beyond what it is now, because it is in obviously a very infantile stage, both in terms of the expected longevity and timescale that this thing will be going on for, but also just in terms of when I look at it, I do kind of see a bit of an angry toddler. Or a lot of the time I see angry toddlers, and I think, there's something more mature we can do with this. There's something more substantial we can do with this. And I think I do see, in little ways, all over the place, I do see more people cottoning on to that and saying, one of the reasons why 9/11 Truth failed so miserably is because we approached it in the wrong way. And so the next time something like that happens, we have to be better prepared and respond to it in a more mature fashion. I do see people recognizing that, just as an example. That's a good thing. And if we can build on that and make that more common, then it could really take off, and it could really have be something that has a real world impact beyond just generating lots of YouTube hits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. You're mentioning 9/11 Truth and just the truth movement in general. There were a lot of intentions from the get-go that, we're going to spread information about this particular subject, and through that, something would happen, and it all revolved around a certain thing. But it's sort of gone off to something more generalized, and the initial goals have kind of fallen by the wayside, have they not?
Well, what are the goals of the 9/11 Truth movement, in as much as it still exists? I get that it still exists. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to anyone here, but an opportunity that existed around 2004, 2005 has now gone, and a lot of people have realized that because it's now nearly 10 years later. I don't know what it is that they're really trying to accomplish anymore. And this is one of the reasons I don't tend to talk about 9/11, except in terms of things like its psychological and historical impact. Those are things very much still worth talking about. But the notion that we're somehow going to solve the crime of 9/11 itself, that opportunity's gone. And it's sad and it's disappointing, but I think we have to come to terms with that and treat 9/11 in a different way, because, like I say, that way that we did do it for 10 years failed. So,
in one sense it failed, but in one sense it may have been successful too.
Well, when I say failed, I mean failed in the sorts of aims that people had for it, rather than it's a complete failure. Of course, it isn't a complete failure. A lot of interesting stuff and a lot of good stuff came out of the 9/11 Truth movement. But I think most of those people are now looking for something else. They're now looking for something broader than that sort of single-issue movement to be a part of. And so that's what the alternative media, I think, has to recognize and has to start delivering to them if it really wants to succeed.
Yeah, very good. Now, do you think that there's any other mediums, we talked about the podcast medium in particular, but any other perhaps ignored mediums out there that the alternative could start using? I do wonder about things like, not exactly teleconferencing, but more that sort of thing where if you can get some kind of, to me, the ideal lesson, if you're doing it at a distance rather than if you actually have a classroom or something, would be everyone watches a documentary on a subject and then you all meet up on Skype or wherever and have just a group discussion about it. It would be that kind of format. That would really interest me, because that, and obviously you'd record the whole group discussion and then stick that all up as a package so that people can, other people who weren't there at the time can be a part of it all and maybe join the later ones. Yeah. I think that way of doing things would actually be really good. I mean, we've sort of started going in that direction in some of the projects we've been doing, more roundtable stuff and more just sort of discussions about things rather than that more didactic model of I've got some information that I'm going to try and tell you. It's just let's have a constructive discussion so that other people listening can A, enjoy it because it's quite fun to listen to, but also B, hear what a constructive discussion about something sounds like.
because that makes it far easier for them to have them with their friends and their people that they talk to about stuff, rather than, like I say, the sort of more didactic model where the whole aim is just to get something across to someone, to make someone either understand or believe in something. I think there's media that is more, like I say, just sort of interactive, and where there is more of a group dynamic rather than a host and an audience. That's where it could go. That would really get me going. I'd be interested in that. If people are doing that, I'd be a part of it.
So that's almost an evolution of the internet forum. I mean, I've never talked to you about this. What are your thoughts? Not that I remember, at least. What are your thoughts on internet forums? And in the context that you just raised, could they sort of come out into this bigger, maybe real life project?
I'm a big fan of forums. They were kind of like before we had MySpace and Facebook and all of that nonsense, forums were where people met up just to bat ideas around and quite often argue with each other. But that's all quite good fun. So yeah, they are now something of an arcane format because the internet has sort of moved on. And whenever you go on a PHP forum these days, you always think this does look like internet technology from 10 years ago. But that isn't I don't have a problem with that. Yeah, I like forums. I don't participate in that many, but I do quite like them. There is a problem of getting addicted to them.
Sure. Yeah.
That is something that in periods of my life I have suffered from. So always one to be wary of. But yeah, I think just anywhere, any structure or format whereby people are meeting effectively as equals. So it's not like anyone here is really in charge of the discussion. Anyone here is really in charge of the information. I think you can have it just has a better spirit to it. And it has a more inclusive spirit, not in the sort of progressive liberal way, but in the sense of affirming people's ability to do things, affirming everyone else's ability to be part of this. Because that's something else that I think the alternative media needs to do more of, is emphasize that this isn't just about consuming information. This is about taking on the right and the responsibility yourself of your own intellectual and spiritual development. So it's not just about going, oh, because this person said something, this is true, and what they're saying is false. It's about making that judgment for yourself and knowing that you're making that judgment for yourself. And I think that's, like I say, if you have a somewhat broader, somewhat more open format, and forums are like this, and the sort of discussion thing that I just mentioned would be like this, it emphasizes that everyone has a right and responsibility to their own opinions and their own judgments and their own values about the world. And that's the sort of philosophy I'd really like to see widespread in the alternative media, because it isn't a didactic one. It isn't one that obliges people to think or believe or do anything, but it's one that ultimately empowers and respects everyone.
Yeah, very good. It's almost like a high school debate club, but changed so it's not debate. It's more just, it's not the harsh, like, this person versus that person sort of thing. You take that element away from it. It becomes almost more constructive, maybe.
It's more like sitting around a campfire, having a couple of beers and staring at the sky and chatting about something, but in a slightly more serious context than that.
Yeah, exactly. You're talking about very serious things, but in a relaxed and inviting atmosphere.
Exactly. Yeah. Nail on the head.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are yearning for that too, because in everyday conversation, you've got the whole factor of, well, I can't mention this because that's something that people don't like, and so there's a real, hunger for this sort of thing. It's a need. We need to express ourselves. I mean, is that where we're going into the positive view of the future? Is that what the humanity actually needs? Is some way to express themselves in this way?
Well, yeah, some way to express ourselves in a way that doesn't lead us into this insane tabloidizing, polarizing discussion where everything is maximum controversy and there's no scale or spectrum of response and there's no way of measuring, oh, well, should I be this angry about it or should I be that angry about it? It's just sort of everything's either hysterically funny or furiously angry or incredibly depressed or, whatever. And that, it's just crazy making. It's no surprise that people end up crazy when they listen to this sort of crap all day. And it's no surprise they find it difficult to have sane, constructive conversations when that's the conversation that they're listening to most of the time. So, yeah, optimistically, I think if the alternative media takes on that as its, or at least one of its mantles, one of its missions, is to actually just show people that there is a different kind of conversation to be had, regardless of the topic, regardless of, well, you shouldn't really be talking about Kim Kardashian, but if you insist there is a better way of talking about Kim Kardashian, all the way through to, the so-called killing of bin Laden, or whatever it is, Federal Reserve, whatever it is that you think is a really serious issue, there's a better way of talking about all of it. So let's try and talk better about it and encourage others and show others how to talk better about it. And if nothing else, that would be something worth accomplishing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, are there any other just general thoughts on alternative media, or anything that you want people to kind of take away, anything for people who are consuming alt media? Any last thoughts that you have, Tom?
Only really that if you're primarily a consumer, or if you are just a consumer, you don't produce your own media, firstly, I'd ask, why not? I mean, whatever it is that you want to talk about, or that you might be good at talking about, or even if you're making music or writing poetry or doing comedy or whatever, you can always just try it. There's nothing bad going to happen, to be honest.
Yeah.
Or nothing that bad is going to happen.
No.
But yeah, okay, if you are just a consumer and you're not really bold enough, or you're not really into the idea of making your own media, pursue that stuff that makes you feel, without meaning to sound soppy, that makes you feel good about yourself rather than makes you feel bad about yourself. Pursue that media that makes you feel like you do have mastery over your own life, and that you can do something worthwhile with it, and jettison all of the crap that tells you that you're not, because you just don't need to listen to it. And the best, because it's not true. So you seriously, you physically do not need to listen to this stuff, and it is just a form of psychological poison. It probably does as much harm as drinking mercury. Well, not quite as much, but and to producers of media, I would honestly say, yeah, just kind of forget about truth per se. I'm not saying don't do investigative journalism or that kind of media. By all means do, but don't have any great pretense to the truth. Just have I would say, have a commitment not so much to the truth, but to sincerity and honesty, because that's what people respect in journalism. It's someone who will say, this is what I found, and then the following day, if they find something that contradicts it, they will say, I found this and it contradicts it. People have loads of respect for that. What people don't respect is when someone says that they've got the truth and they know that they haven't. So rather than a truth movement being the kind of background to the alternative media, like I say, my desire would be for a sincerity, substance, spirit movement. And I would appeal to all alternative media hosts who may be listening to this, to make that the center of what you're doing.
Very good. Very good. I know I'll take that to heart, Tom, and I very much appreciate you coming on the show today. And as always, I want to just ask you to tell the audience about your websites and what you may be up to in the near future.
Okay, well, I mean, thanks for having me on, Aaron. This has been a very, very interesting series that you've done, and I hope I've contributed some kind of bookend to it.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, my work, most of my stuff is at my two websites, investigatingtheterror.com, which is where I do all of my stuff about state terrorism and the spies and the double agents inside the terror gangs and all of that kind of stuff. That's also where I post all of the interviews and appearances that I do on other people's radio shows and podcasts. They're all on investigatingtheterror.com. My own podcast is called Clandestine, which is on YouTube, and it's also on spyculture.com, which is a website devoted to spy culture, but specifically devoted to, if you like, state-sponsored spy culture. All of the connections between the culture industries and the military-industrial complex. So yeah, spyculture.com, investigatingtheterror.com. You'll find all of my stuff on those two sites.
All right. Well, thank you again, Tom. I hope to speak with you sometime soon.
Yeah, and cheers for having me on. It's been great talking to you as ever.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Trans Resistor Radio. And once again, I hope you enjoyed this series, the alternative media series of interviews that I have had here on Trans Resistor Radio. This is it. It has come to a close. Please let me know what you thought of the series. I'd really appreciate feedback on that a lot. And I have lots of great ideas for Trans Resistor Radio here in the future. There's a lot of things I want to talk about, and I will be having more guests on certainly. So be sure to subscribe to the podcast, keep listening, and to share this podcast with others. I thank you very much for doing so. The website is ageoftransitions.com. I am Aaron Franz, Secker, Segon. Today's episode of Trans Resistor Radio was recorded on the 4th of March, 2014.